Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Hey.
Hey,
Oh my God, do you have new glasses?
I do have new glasses. They are especially horn-rimmed. So before they were horn-rimmed, now they're very horn-rimmed.
I noticed that. It looks real good.
I can now see because my prescription has been dialed up.
Really? Okay, because I just had my eye appointment and my prescription is basically the same, but my son did have a new one, so he got new glasses.
Yeah. What you been working on?
I've just been heads down on this MCP course. So I recorded the first module, so I'll be submitting it this week before we go do some camping again during MEA weekend. Yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing. Now, one thing with the MCP course is that I did some research ahead of time because I was like, do I want to cover the same thing everyone else is covering, which is like TypeScript, maybe Python, how to build an MCP server. I'm like, no, I think with Pluralsight's, subscriber makeup, it's mostly enterprises. And what do enterprises use? .NET, Java for the backend. So I chose to do a .NET MCP server, and I'm integrating it with Microsoft Azure and Azure Functions and stuff like that. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I've already got the MCP server working, and I've got a mock Workday API in the backend. There's actually, OpenAI has a cookbook on how to get a custom GPT working with Workday. And so I basically took that OpenAPI spec and I made it into an Azure Function app. So that will be the enterprise API that the MCP server will abstract.
Well, that's cool.
So I'm hoping to use it as like a realistic example because it'll be secured with OAuth using Azure API Management and Entra ID. So it'll be like realistic. And
yeah, totally.
Actually do it. And then we'll build the MCP server to make that experience much nicer because if you look at the API surface, it's totally wild because it's like a typical sort of vendor API system. So I'm kind of excited about that because I think it'll be a good use case for like, oh, here's why we're doing MCP. It actually kind of makes sense here, in this case. So anyway, and then on the weekend we watched The Witch again, which we haven't watched for like 9 years, like since it came out. And it's, a really good movie. And it's a spooky Halloween movie.
Oh yeah. The Vite.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
It was, it was much more helpful to watch it with subtitles on because we had watched it in the theater and sometimes it was hard to understand what they were saying because they speak in like old English,
Yeah. No, it definitely requires subtitles, I feel like. And then also like, I can't remember if this is one of the eras of like horror movie where it's just too dark and you can't see anything.
Actually, they shot it all with pretty much all natural light is sort of what we were reading about. So that's probably why.
Yeah. My daughter in the background was like, wow.
It is a beautiful movie.
Yeah, they're home from school today for Indigenous Peoples Day. So you might hear my daughter shouting in the background about something.
Special guest, Rick's daughter will be on the podcast.
Grandpa's watching.
Awesome. How about you? What have you been working on?
Oh, I've been pretty heads down on some work, just doing like literally architecture work. So I've been trapped in Confluence for most of the last week.
Please let me out.
Yeah, that's what it feels like sometimes. Atlassian, come on, help me out. The other thing I've been working on is I've been redoing some easing functions in Excalibur just to make them simpler. So kind of your classic, give me a time, I'll get between 0 and 1, and I'll give you a value between 0 and 1. Mm-hmm. Before they were kind of, we were rolling lerp into those like by default. And so we just broke those apart into two separate. Makes it easier to implement actually, and for people to bring their own. So I've been doing that. And then I fixed a bug with coroutines in Excalibur where in some async contexts, we would lose track of the context of like the engine. So like coroutines automatically discover the scheduler, which is nice. And it uses the same trick that like the context API and React does. Mm-hmm. But if you have like an async function, you lose your stack, you get stack replaced, and that causes problems. So there's actually a proposal TC39 around async contexts, which I stole their polyfill to fix it in Excalibur, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
And I got a brand new book on C programming for the C23 standard, and I've been thumbing. I'm like 3/4 of the way through. It's right here. It's like, this is where I'm at.
Nice.
I've been thumbing through it, and I passed out on the couch yesterday while reading it.
That's awesome. I've been reading another Roger Martin book, The Design of Business, and it is pretty good.
I'll have to pick that up.
It's talking about the knowledge funnel and how we tend to work from like having a gut feeling for how to build a business, and then we transform that into like a heuristic, and then the final stage is to transform that into an algorithm. But anyway, good stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the news for the week of October 6th.
We've got some React news because it was ReactConf 2025. So there were 2 days, and I have linked to the live streams in the show notes if you want to watch them. They're each like 8 hours long, so you might want to just wait until the videos come out. But we're going to go through the highlights, so the too long didn't watch.
Yep.
Let's start with React 19.2. Now, interestingly, I don't know if we covered 19.1 because that dropped in June.
Mm-hmm.
React 19 dropped in December, which surprisingly enough was before we started the podcast.
That's true.
So we wouldn't have had a week where we covered that. But anyway, this is the third release this year, which is pretty significant because React 18 like barely had any releases for like 2 years. Okay, 19.2. They solved a really annoying problem with React development, which was conditional rendering. You know how you would do like the my Boolean and then your JSX so that it would conditionally render the JSX?
Yep.
Now, you're really not really supposed to do that because that value can be coerced into a string and then it'll just render like true or false into the page.
Yeah.
You know you've been bit by that. So you're supposed to do the ternary where you're like my Boolean ? My JSX : null, right? So then it just outputs null. Okay. They solved that. They have a new component called activity, and it has the same effect where it won't run any of the code within the activity in the children if the Boolean is false. So it has one prop called mode, and that's where you can say visible or hidden, and then your Boolean can decide like what you want to do. And so that's the new model for doing that. So I'm kind of happy about that because it solves a nice problem.
Yeah, one of the cool things here is you can pre-render and keep rendering hidden parts of the app without impacting performance of anything visible on the screen, which is kind of like where the hacks before bit you. And you're just like, it worked, air quotes.
That's right.
But now we have something like first class.
Yeah, it's great. We've got new custom performance tracks in Chrome DevTools. So, if you use the profiler in Chrome DevTools, you can like hook into it to tell it extra information to do like custom profiling information and metadata. And so they've added new hooks into that. So it'll show you like each component's rendering time and how long it takes to mount. And we had this ability long time ago, and then it kind of got superseded with the React DevTools. But now this is also just in vanilla Chrome DevTools. Like you don't even need the React DevTools installed to get this. It just comes in 19.2. So if you are used to looking at that flame graph, it's gotten prettier. So that's nice.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go take a look at that code because I want to steal that.
Yeah, this would be great for Excalibur for sure. Okay, next feature, pretty big one. If you've ever been familiar with the app shell pattern for React, it's where you have a static HTML file that you serve from like a CDN, and then you kind of fill it in with SSR on the server or with static site generation. You can do the same thing. And at Target, we had this pattern. We had to build it ourselves. This was not something that was like supported out of the box. But in 19.2, it is, and it's called partial pre-rendering. So it supports SSR and SSG, and you can basically give it the component you want to dynamically inject into a shell. So you can serve the shell from like a CDN, hand it over to React, and then tell it, here's my app component. I want you to render that into this shell. So this can significantly improve your time to first byte and some other stuff too. So this is really nice for teams that were doing that kind of pattern before. And finally, this is more of a niche feature, but they did add web stream support for SSR because so far React Server components have supported node streams, and that's still recommended by the team because that is more performant than trying to convert between web streams and passing it to SSR. But now you can, if you're in that situation where you only have like a readable stream from the web API, you can now pass that to SSR and it will render. So I'm not quite sure what use cases that's for, but someone out there needs it.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just a faster way of doing server-side rendering because you can just incrementally do stuff as it's coming in.
Maybe, but the thing is that for the fastest performance, you want to use node streams. And that's how Suspense and things like that have worked in the past.
Yeah, okay.
So I think that this is for a specific context where you might not have access to node streams.
I see.
And your platform or runtime only supports web streams.
Okay.
So I could see that.
Okay. That makes sense.
Next up, we've heard, those of you who are React devs have probably heard about the React compiler. It's been experimental for the past year or two. And
React compiler. You get caught up in the React compiler.
Nice. Is that a song?
You remember that old toy, like Crossfire, where you steal marbles?
Yes.
That stuff? Yeah.
Yes.
I think the band, was it Steel Panther, sang that song? Yeah, it was the most metal toy commercial ever.
Yeah. I do remember that. That's awesome. That's hilarious. So 1.0 dropped. So now it's stable and it's kind of cool. It's totally backwards compatible with React 17 and 18, which is good news.
Yeah.
Yep. And it should basically just work. And it will work even if you're currently using the memoization hooks, like use memo, use callback, etc. While they say that it will just work, we know that production code can be messy. And sometimes people don't use hooks in the way they're kind of supposed to, like they might be ignoring dependencies or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are risk averse, you can also adopt it incrementally where you can pass a configuration option to tell it, only compile these directories. So you can then test it on one feature, make sure it works, run your tests, and then you can expand that glob to include more files and folders.
I would do that.
Yeah, that's probably how I'm going to do it, but I'm kind of excited to adopt it. So how do you get it? Right now, it's currently distributed as a Babel plugin. So if you're using Vite, you would configure the React plugin. It has a Babel option. You can pass the plugins there. For other build tools, they do have documentation for like Webpack, RSPack, which is what I use. But notably, you might want to hold off on just a little bit because currently they do have experimental support for SWC, and Next.js has that integrated. So if you're using Next.js, it's just going to come for free with that, and it's still experimental, but pretty soon they're going to implement it in Oxy, and then once Rolldown is officially released and supported in Vite, Oxy will have React compiler, and so they'll update the docs with information. So you still might want to wait a little bit, but I think the stats that they have are pretty compelling. Like, it's increased some stuff by like 2.5 times faster using the React compiler because it can catch stuff that you don't normally catch, or like the lint rules can't statically analyze as easily. So, yeah, for sure, you definitely want to take a look. And I think this is going to be a standard thing for React apps from now on. So
one of the things to like, the reason it does this is because it's running less code. Like the compiler can analyze your code and decide we don't need to rerun this, or we can do something smarter here.
Exactly. Yep. So it will change your production code output. That's why you might want to adopt it incrementally and test it out.
It will change behavior.
It will.
And if you did it wrong, you might have a bug if you turn it on.
They say that those are rare edge cases. I don't know if I actually believe that. I think it's going to be more common than just knowing what I know about React code bases that I've seen in the wild.
Yeah, I would definitely do the incremental approach. If you're really hot to trot on this, or I'd let it bake for maybe a little bit longer before I jump in with both feet.
Because since it right now is a Babel plugin, that's just regular JavaScript, so it will slow down your build. So if you have a really big code base, adding this could be slower. You might want to just wait until it's with Oxy or with a SWC. Okay. The other kind of large change, not like to the technology itself, but the governance around it, is that Meta has now formed what's called the React Foundation. So this is more like the Node.js Foundation kind of deal, where now multiple companies will have stakes in the development of React, not just Meta. Now, at this point, it's mostly big companies that are still going to be like having ownership in that governance process, but it's open to other companies. So I think this is sort of good news, or very good news, I would say, because now our livelihoods don't just depend on Meta. And I think hopefully this will allow some more well-rounded kind of diversity of thoughts to the React ecosystem, which I think will be kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm looking at the React Foundation. I'm very curious how their governance works. Like if you buy a seat on the board, or if it's like some of the other like Linuxy ones where it's like purely a vote. Or like I'm really curious about the details, because like sometimes there's these foundations, but they're effectively still a monopoly.
Yeah, we don't want that. We'll drop some links in the show notes for some. There was a podcast from CallStack that was about 2 hours long, just ReactConf. So if you want some more details, the team was there at the conference, so they had a lot to say about it. So these are just the highlights, but we'll link to a few other resources if you really want to dive deeper into all the stuff that's new.
For sure. The blog post is pretty sparse on the details, but it is exciting.
Yep. Cool. Next up, we've got Bun 1.3, which they say is the biggest release yet.
Wouldn't you like to live deliciously? Delicious buns.
That's a witch reference, y'all. I love that. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie is when Black Phillip talks. Okay. So big news here that's not at the top of the blog post, but maybe should be, is that for their package manager that's built into Bun, they just released a security scanner API. So what was life like before this? You'd have to download an external tool like socket.dev, install it globally, and then use that as your way to install dependencies. With the Socket Scanner API, these companies like Socket, they're actually releasing an official scanner. It gets built into the Bun package lifecycle. So you can just keep using Bun install or Bun uninstall or Bun update, and those security scanners will just run as part of that. And that includes custom scanners too. So like enterprises can create scanner tools now and plug that in. So I think that this is a pretty nice way to do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see other tool vendors like add hooks for security infrastructure into their package manager lifecycles. So like I wouldn't be surprised if Dino or NPM follow suit in a similar way. Like you said, Socket before you'd get an external tool, and plenty of other things did that too, where you'd act as a proxy. But it would be great if you had first party access, because then as an organization, you could just deploy that out, hook into the first party tools with like first party integrations, and be a part of that security apparatus. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing this in like the Python package system, the Rust, what have you, because every package system has the same underlying issues that NPM does.
Yes.
So this, I think, is pretty novel in my opinion.
You know what happens when lots of diverse tools have basically the same architecture? Usually we create a spec. And so that we can like be consistent with things. So what would be really nice is if the Bun team got together and, reached out to some of these other tool vendors and were like, hey, maybe we should get together and think about security from a more holistic perspective. Could we just all get onto the same page? And maybe we could see the security scanner API spec instead of like just inside a Bun. But you got to start somewhere. Yeah. Right. So
this is huge though. This is considering all of the security stuff that's happened in the last 2 months. This is a huge headline.
And by the way, I think we had said on a previous podcast that Bun was using a binary lock file, but that's not actually the case. I guess on 1.2, they migrated to text-only lock files. So that's cool now. So it's much easier to do a diff and see like what stuff has changed. But they did mention that in the overview video of 1.3. So
yeah, I think that was a criticism that me and others had levied, because it's having a lock file that's binary is a great way for malware to hide.
Yep. Okay, next up, one of the top things that they do headline is that you can now use Bun as a full stack front-end dev tool. So you don't have to use Vite. You can just use Bun now. What that means is that you can point it at your HTML files and script files, and it will create the dev server for you. It'll serve it, and it can build it. And it has routing and stuff all built in. So you don't need any extra tools. It's all just included inside of Bun. So they've got basically a full thing. integrated. Next up, they have isolated installs. This is useful for monorepos. A common problem in a monorepo is you're in package A, you import a dependency, and it works, but technically that dependency is a dependency in package B that package A doesn't reference. And that's because you have a top-level node modules file, and it searches upwards. So wherever it finds a module in your directory tree, it'll just use that. But for Bun, they now have a setting in your workspace where you can turn on isolation. And so that will only install dependencies in the package it is referenced by. And so you can't accidentally use a dependency from another package. So I think that's pretty helpful because those are annoying and elusive bugs that can pop up with that. It's like, why isn't it working?
Well, it turns out this cocktail of packages is what you need.
Yep, exactly.
That's how I feel in Docusaurus right now.
There are some TypeScript improvements. So this is related to TypeScript. They switched to preserve module format from ESNext, which makes sense because Bun supports ESM natively, so there's no extra transformation that TypeScript needs to do to run in Bun. So they switched that over. And then we did cover some of these type improvements, but there was a fix for the type definitions that fix things between browser typings, DOM typings, and node typings. So those fixes are in 1.3.
Nice. And moving on to TypeScript news, Visual Studio just posted that the TypeScript 7 native preview is now available in the Visual Studio 2026 Insiders build. So if you want to live on that bleeding edge, you can get Visual Studio 2026 and try out TypeScript 7 native preview in Visual Studio, which I will definitely be trying.
Here, you can also live deliciously.
Wouldn't you like to live deliciously?
Oh my God. I love it. Okay. What's happening in TC39?
A couple interesting things. We did talk a little bit about async context, and I kind of glided over that. But async context is a way of explicitly keeping track of scope and variables through an async boundary. And there's a lot of prior art for this. Plenty of languages that have implemented async await also have similar constructs, and they go through that prior art here. But this is a thing that is hard to do in userland code right now, which I had to do, and it's not perfect either. So this is a thing that you can build into the language itself, and I think you'll have a higher fidelity of async stacks and sharing context and variables across those async stacks. Because it looks like sequential code, it's like an easy bug for things to happen. And they have a motivating example in here. And this actually was a problem. It was a little clearer when you did like a set timeout, for example, that your stack was being replaced because, set timeout. But async await, it's not as clear that that's happening because it looks like sequential code. And the equivalent sequential code would just work, if you just remove the await. So it's definitely if you're on the coroutine side of things like I am, or you're on the async await side of things like I am, it's definitely something that you'll want to take a look at, and we'll include that in the show notes. The next thing that's interesting is a new module keyword for module declarations. This is JavaScript module declarations. And this might look familiar because this is like the same syntax as like the TypeScript module, like ambient module in the DTS. Like you could do like module thing, put a whole bunch of stuff in it. And then, you'll have actual JavaScript way of saying there's a module, which is interesting. And there's some motivating reasons behind this. There's like 4 paragraphs here. Let me see if I can summarize this into like a more pithy way of doing this. So this proposal adds syntax to JavaScript to allow several JavaScript modules in one file. This format can be used as output by bundlers with low overhead on execution so that bundlers don't have to emulate as much. JS engines can see what's going on, and it's also convenient to be typed directly by JavaScript developers, and it should be low overhead to fit into existing workflows. One nice thing here is that bundlers need to virtualize the entire ES module semantics, and this increases complexity and cost over time. But now, for example, modules are a convenient point to divide up code for parallel bytecode generation. So that's nice. But this type of structure isn't super visible to JS engines today. They have to make like guesses if they're doing anything like that. So if bundlers make everything into one big script or module, it's hard to know. So now there's like possibilities here, both logical and like from a developer facing way and from like an optimization.
Cool. So possibly build tools go faster.
Possibly.
This. Yeah.
No promises.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
Pun intended?
No, not intended, but that's funny. And then lastly, defer import evaluation moves to stage 3. And this is that thing where if you have a dynamic import, you might want to avoid evaluating the code unless you need to.
Yes. Otherwise, there could be a side effect. Yeah, that's cool. Stage 3, getting closer.
Getting closer.
That means it's going to be in TypeScript then at some point.
That's right. In TypeScript 5.9, import defer is there. Support for it. Yep.
It's already there. 5.9. Perfect. What else you got?
All right. Vite Plus was announced at ViteConf this last week, I believe. And then there's also a companion blog post with the Vite Plus announcement at ViteConf describing more about what's going on there. The whole goal here is to be the whole dev tool chain. And they were talking about how enterprises might want to have like their own stuff in that whole tool chain. There's a Vite UI now for GUI dev tools. There's a Vite install, and I think it's they're talking about Core Pack or NI equivalent. I'm not familiar with NI actually. There's a Vite run for like monorepo task runners and having like some caching in there for like maybe module federation for like big projects, you know, enterprisey. Vite new for scaffolding and generators. Vite lib for library building. In parentheses, they mention it's similar to TS down. And Vite test, Vite format, ESLint, Vite build. So the idea is you got one stop shop to do all your stuff.
Yep. And it even works across runtimes. I see they have Node.js, Bun, and Dino listed. So then you wouldn't be tied into a specific runtime either.
That's right. And I think this is another example of where the environments API gets empowering a lot of this behavior, right? Because if you are building for Cloudflare or you're building for Dino, you're doing, you know, you got to emit different code. So that's where that environments API really comes into play, I think.
Yeah. I could see this being useful just thinking about how the web platform team, how we operated, because we had to build a lot of this infrastructure ourselves for the product teams to use. And like we had to build our own custom CLIs to like, you know, get stuff from the right place, to use our own SDKs, to do tasks, like to create templates and things like that. We had to write our own template generators and stuff. So I could see a unified tool with the ability to customize and like add your own enterprisey stuff to it. I could see that being compelling. And it looks like on the homepage, I was just looking at the landing page. It's nicely designed. You can see all the different features of it. But if you're an open source or non-commercial, you can use it for free. So that's pretty cool. So if you're working on some open source projects, and then they have like a startup plan, but they don't list the pricing. It just says a flat fee. So I guess more to come there, but that's pretty cool. So this is kind of the way that they're going to earn revenue, I guess, to build the next gen JavaScript tooling ecosystem.
Awesome. We have another PSA.
Oh no. What's gone wrong now?
The StealIt malware abuses Node.js's single executable file feature via game and VPN installers. This is kind of thwarting antivirus because it's a single executable and it's all Node.js. It's just JavaScript. So it's kind of sneaking in. And the creators of this malware offer malware subscriptions you can buy.
Yeah.
Criminal enterprise as a service.
That's right. Yeah, Malware-as-a-Service, baby. I wonder how many subscribers they have to those. It looks like it's, you know, pretty affordable. $500 for a lifetime malware license. You can just infect whoever you want. That's great.
Yeah.
Webcam control even. Ooh.
Yeah. The Windows Stealer ranges from $29.99 for a weekly subscription or $500 for a lifetime. That's wild.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you got to have a nice business model for that, I guess.
That is hilarious.
Man. So
they even have a nice little CLI.
Oh my God. They really, yeah, this is pretty funny. What's also interesting is that it says that they are kind of exploiting the psychology of user behavior because gamers and people who are looking for VPNs are more willing to install things that are not from trusted sources. And so they're taking advantage of that by packaging their malware into Node.js executables. Now, the other thing that this made me think of is that this probably wouldn't have to be limited to Node.js, right? Because Dino and Bun both support executable binaries. So maybe they just haven't gotten to that yet, but that'll be next. So I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get ahead of like virus scanners and malware detection until they get wise and they start doing that. But what's interesting too is that it mentions how it would be really hard to detect, like for a virus scanner to scan an entire Node.js executable to try to find like malware signatures and stuff. So I guess I don't know how long it'll be until, scanners get up to snuff with this.
Yeah.
So just be on the
start
lookout.
blocking
Don't be downloading VPN installers and things like that from places you don't know.
Yeah, I think there was like a recent security. I'll have to find it, but there was an article about how most of the VPN extensions in the Chrome Web Store were malware.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah.
I tend to only have like 3 or 4 well-known extensions installed.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were saying VPNs. I'm like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah.
I need a bespoke VPN for, various activities that I participate in.
Not me. Cool. Should we do some community highlights?
Yeah, Dr. Axel is back at it again with a great post on CSS, and he also adds a little box model tester with it. But this is a great little refresher if you are well-versed in CSS or web development. This is kind of the modern brass tacks, your basic CSS. And honestly, reading through it, it was a great refresher because I was like, oh yeah, you can do that thing. Oh yeah, you can do that thing. Oh yeah, that's a thing.
I agree that CSS, I just bleated about this the other day. I was reading a post from Chris Coyer. Is it Coyer from CSS Hacks on his CSS starter that he uses for projects. And I'm like reading through it, and I'm like, when did this get introduced to CSS? Since when did we have this? And there's just a lot of new features in like CSS 3, CSS 4, CSS 5. I don't know, what are we on even now? Like I learned CSS a long time ago, and I feel pretty good about my CSS skills, but like they have not stayed as up to date as like TypeScript or JavaScript. So there's definitely stuff I'm missing. Like I know how to do variables. I know how you can do nesting now, which is huge. But there were a lot of properties and stuff that I saw in that example where I was like, what is this? Where did it come from? So I think a refresher is in order because vanilla CSS has evolved quite a bit.
Yeah. There's a lot of goodies in there. And honestly, like a lot of my problems I solved with Flexbox.
Well, Flexbox definitely, and then CSS Grid is amazing. So I use that a lot too. Cool.
Awesome. Next up, Josh Goldberg has a good issue about why type linting is currently blocked by ESLint core. And he has a good issue, kind of medium deep dive about, why things are why we're not having type linting like the way we want it necessarily. Yeah, go check that out.
We've got some library watches. It looks like you saw a few libraries.
Yeah, let's see. Immer has some perf improvements that are going to land soon. Mark Erickson tweeted about a benchmark that shows 20 to 90% faster in versus the current V10 of Immer, which is huge for those of you that are doing like Redux style reducer type stuff. This is big. This is just like your app will be faster. This is so cool. And there's some cool hacks here.
We teased this actually a few episodes ago too, because I think this PR is still in progress, but it's getting closer and performance has improved even more since we last spoke about it. But I don't think it's currently merged yet.
No, it's not merged yet.
Yeah.
I think the last comment on it was 16 hours ago.
Okay.
I'm very excited.
Nice. Yeah.
I use Immer.
Yeah, we can't wait for it. Sweet. And looks like you've actually found the library that we were talking about from Liren Tall's blog post that we mentioned in the last episode on using 1Password locally to improve your secrets with Node.js. So you actually found the library and it's using TypeScript.
That's right. And there's a really great article about using this library, and it's using the room as an example. Of how to like a narrative of using this library. It's called lib1password unofficial because it's unofficial. So like, buyer beware, you're going to use an unofficial library. And they have a warning at the top here. While the 1Password team greenlit the publication of this library and the accompanying demo, neither is an official product developed or maintained by AgileBits Inc., which is the people that own 1Password.
Yep. So it's a community SDK. That's not a bad thing, but good to be aware of.
But they have an interactive explainer here that talks about how secret key generation and validation works, how how the key derivation works, how the vault encryption works, and how the master account key set architecture works. So it's if you want to use this for your enterprise, this might be a thing to look at. And maybe vendor. Like if you're like, oh, I don't trust a third party, I'm going to vendor this and like go inspect every line of code, because this is the type of library where you probably should do that. But yeah, it's a really humorous blog post talking about how this whole thing works and has plenty of the room references for you to giggle at.
Nice. Sounds good. We have a joke this week to end the community highlights section on.
Yeah. Blue Sky user Freya Links bleated, TypeScript is so passé. We need HypeScript. TypeScript.
That's right.
I love that. That was so funny.
Sweet. What are your cool links?
Well, I think the first one for me is, have you noticed that search really is awful now? Like, especially like Google search? Like,
yeah, the AI overviews that like will lie to you half the time.
Yeah.
Yes. And my wife has pointed this out to me. It is not just me saying that. My wife has shown me like, I searched for this thing and the AI overview said this, and when I looked at it, it was definitely not true. Like
it's
getting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's wild is we're like looking for, I was like, my skip was sending me a message and they were like, hey, look at this number, this metric I pulled off of Google. I'm like, that is an AI overview. Try again. And then we looked up the actual number and it was completely different. So I was like, it's like, okay, like, so we need to like very carefully, you know, and, you know, we're susceptible to it too. We need to be very careful about what we internalize as fact now that there's all of these summaries showing up. Plus, the first whole full page of results seem to be like slop and just like, and you could tell, like you start reading, you're like, oh, this looks like the thing I want to read about. Like I'm asking a question to the search.
Yep.
I'm like, wait a second. This is just all fluff and, you know, rhetorical devices and then all tautologies. And I'm like, wait a second.
Yes.
I've been duped.
I've told you the telltales of like AI writing is like it's not this, it's this, you know, type of language pattern. As soon as I see that, I'm like, this is probably AI. And then the other telltale is no point of view, no actual wisdom translated into writing. Like
no author.
There's no lived experience. There's no author. There's no, here's what's worked for me in the past. And there's no story about my point of view. There's no point of view for an AI slop article. So, and
they don't
this
get to the point.
Also, just a reminder that we try our very best not to link you to any type of AI slop stuff. So we try to read every single thing that we recommend. We have been caught out a couple times by things that seemed like they were pretty good. And then when you actually go and read it, it's like, this is actually like not good. So anyway, we try to curate that for you. So anything that we link to, hopefully has been fully reviewed and not AI slop. So that's our commitment to you.
That was the preamble for Kagi search, which is a premium search engine that you pay for. And I've heard good things. A lot of people have recommended to me, like in person, like actual humans have said, hey, you should try this out. So I'm going to try it out. I'll report back. But it's not that expensive. You can do a trial for free for 100 searches, and then like you can do a starter for $5 a month, or then you get 300 searches a month, or you can do unlimited searches. But I am kind of into it because if you're paying for it, like you don't need ads, right? Like that's the idea, right? If you're paying for a service, like they don't need to. Yeah, they're not incentivized to show you crap. And I'm interested in seeing like what they're doing with their AI search assistants. So I know as far as like search goes, that's where like large language models can do really well compared to like traditional boosting techniques. So I'm really interested to see like how that plays into this.
Yeah, I mean, it's doing kind of what we have talked about before, where it's like, you're not like, don't ask the AI to do the thing for you. Ask it to help you do the thing better, right? So that'll be interesting to see, like, because I could imagine a AI assistant being helpful for like, hey, I searched for these variations on what you searched for, and here's what I found. Like, but it doesn't try to like give you the answer. You know what I mean? It's not like an AI overview. It's more like, here are these extra search results that I found based on your query.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping for. And I'll report back.
Cool.
A couple other really cool ones is I have a YouTube video from Chris Latner and the designer of the Rock programming language. There's a like hour-and-a-half interview with him, and it's awesome. It really dives into like how Chris Latner, if you're not familiar, is the one that built LLVM. So enabled this whole new generation of like Rust and all of these new languages like Clang. Well, it's not a new language, but like Clang, which uses the LLVM to build like really crazy efficient code, is now working on Mojo, which runs like a Pythonic style language, but it runs on the GPU or the CPU, which is like really cool. And he's making some pretty cool claims, like pretty amazing claims, which I'm inclined to believe because Chris Latner is a genius, that his language runs 10 times faster than Rust. And I'm like, whoa, that means it's really fast. So,
Boy.
And that's because they're doing some pretty wild stuff with the GPU.
Wow.
So this is just like really revolutionary type stuff. And so I thought that was very interesting and very thought provoking. And then I have two more videos that I'll just gloss over briefly. Sebastian Legge has another great coding adventure video about simulating smoke, which was really fun. I don't know, I really like that. And Nick Barker also has a great video about UTF-8 and how it works. And I never understood UTF-8. I just knew that Microsoft has UTF-16 and the web is UTF-16 and you'll be sad when you convert back and forth. That's all I knew. Yeah, those are my cool links.
Nice. Very good. I didn't watch too much stuff this week because I was just working on my course. But as I was browsing the TypeScript feed, aviv.sh called out that the new Node.js homepage has type information, type metadata on hover when you hover over the code snippets. And I was like, yes, Twoslash is really good. So Twoslash is the library that allows you to generate rich type info ahead of time, and it's meant for documentation. And we use it inside of Excalibur.js for the docs to add interactive TypeScript metadata to the snippets, but it also compiles the code during build time when you build the documentation. So it makes sure that the actual code snippets run against the real API, the real built code. So heavily recommend Twoslash. That's my cool link. If you haven't used it before, you should if you're writing documentation and it's with TypeScript. No more broken code snippets if you're using Twoslash. So really nice.
All right. I think it's time for the long goodbye. What's your takeaway?
Goodbye. Well, I just have more thoughts around this whole like security stuff. And I think what's interesting is it definitely feels like we're moving towards something that's going to unify at least the NPM package ecosystem. But yeah, I don't know. There's the security scanner stuff that Bun's working on is cool. And I think what I would love to see is this initial version, fine, can be done with Bun. But what I would love to see is that evolve into like NPM adopting it or Dino adopting it or something, because it shouldn't just be Bun that should do this. Like it would be good for the whole ecosystem if all the package managers could do it. PNPM, obviously. And I didn't read too much about it, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they actually are working on a way to bring it into other package managers, but I'm assuming for now that maybe it's just in Bun. But anyway, I would love to see that. So I think that's one of the things I'm thinking about. So I'm hoping that happens.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree. I think this is a thing that we're going to need more of across the whole landscape, like tighter integration and maybe even thought about security as first class, because I know a lot of times it's like, well, first get the MVP out and then get it. And, that's true to a point. But now we're kind of like, we have the first mover problem on a lot of stuff, like, especially NPM, first mover on the JavaScript package management system. So hopefully we're going to see a whole new wave of like tooling that isn't intrusive and will help us, one, detect malicious stuff, and two, just block it outright. Like we just, you know what I would love to see? And this is a thing that like a lot of people have talked about it, but it'd be so awesome. It'd be so awesome if you could do like per file permissions. Like if you could be like, oh, this file can talk to the disk. Everything else, no.
Yep.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, it would be. Okay, if I'm finishing my thought a little bit more, I think, so here's okay, I have a prediction. My prediction is that if Bun doesn't reach out proactively to these other package managers, they're just going to do it. Node.js is going to see the security scanner API and be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's add that to NPM. And then they're just going to do it. And then again, we're going to, this same cycle of like Node.js is sort of like watching the ecosystem, being like, oh, what's Bun doing over there? What's Dino doing over there? And they're probably not doing it like maliciously or anything. They're just waiting and seeing like what's happening. And then they just take the best bits out of it. We got TypeScript support now. Security scanner API. Let me just take that over here, bring it into NPM. Boom. Now we've released it to the entire market. So this is actually a gameplay that Simon Wardley calls ILC, Innovate, Leverage, Commoditize, and as part of the Wardley Maps doctrines and principles. But you can use, we've seen it. Like we see it all the time in the JavaScript ecosystem. The smaller players like Bun or Dino will come up with an innovation. Node.js will wait because they're the most mature in the ecosystem. They'll take a look, they'll wait till it's a little bit more stable, and then they just bring it in to their ecosystem. And it's not like a malicious thing. It's like would make sense, right? You're leveraging other people's innovation and then commoditizing it because you have the scale to do so and like you have the market advantage. So ILC gameplay is like a strategic gameplay. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so that's something, I guess that's my takeaway is I'm seeing this in the JavaScript ecosystem, this gameplay, which is why Node keeps staying on top. And there are ways to combat that gameplay or like defend against it, but it requires really hard choices. And I'm not really seeing these startups making the types of choices that I think would prevent that. And we probably can't get into too much about that, but I think at least from my perspective, it's more about positioning, at least from what I'm seeing. Like the positioning of Bun is pretty weak compared to Dino, which is weaker compared to Node.js. And Dino's is fairly strong, I would say, but there are still things I question about it. But anyway.
Yeah, totally.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. That's my top level thoughts on it.
No, in terms of positioning, I totally agree with you. And then popping the stack back to security a little bit, I think there is prior art here because a lot of like virus scanners, like on desktop operating systems, have hooks into operating system stuff.
Yeah.
For the purpose of virus scanning.
Yeah.
So I can totally see a world where we have something similar in like package managers. And it makes sense. Like we want to be able to do like real-time security scanning of software we download. I think that just makes like total sense versus like necessarily putting the onus on the registry. And now the registry does have a responsibility, I think, my opinion, to do best effort stuff and be responsive to like reported malware, that kind of thing. But I also think there is a play here for like security vendors and enterprises. I think there's and this is very exciting. Like I'm really excited for Socket. Like this is cool.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I think that's a good place to leave it. Cool. All right. Well, we'll catch you all later.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to typescript.fm where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at kamronigus.com and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.